Hello, everyone, and we welcome you into the Go 24/7 podcast. My name is Bryce Koon alongside Glen West. Recording this on a Sunday evening. A lot of you might be finding this on Monday morning in your podcast feeds, and we appreciate that. Whether that's on the podcast only feed, whether it's Spotify or Apple, or if it's over on YouTube, we appreciate it. Would love for you to give us a subscription over there, completely free. Just support the show and what we continue to do. Bryce Koon, Glen West. Glen, we are kind of in this weird thing where everything's starting to kind of slow down at once. Women's basketball came to an end. We're not going to talk about baseball and the hype surrounding that in the preseason, but now spring football going to enter its final weekend. Now it's slowing down essentially in spring football practice, but not with that portal opening next week. Obviously, a lot of conversation happening in that end of the next couple of days and weeks. But Glenn, big scrimmage type setting, I guess you could call open practice. We saw a lot of opportunities of guys going one-on-ones, some 11-on-11 work and stuff like that on Saturday. Just kind of give your overall thoughts to what you saw. I know we're going to hone in on two specific things that Brian Kelly talked about in his presser afterwards, but just kind of your overall thoughts and maybe what you took away from Saturday.
Yeah, the final time that LSU kind of opened things up for full practice for the media, I thought it was very, positive in terms of what we were able to kind of see out there. You only get to see so much in these 20-minute individual drills. So getting to have a couple of these 2-hour long practices where they get a lot of 11-on-11 periods in, kind of mixed in there as well, I think has helped us out, I guess, from a media perspective, just to get a little bit of an understanding of what they want to do offensively and on the defensive side of the ball as well. And I think probably the overwhelming takeaway for me, at least offensively, has been the diversity in the run game. You see, we've written about it, we've heard about it from Brian Kelly, from players, from offensive coordinator Joe Sloan, just about how diverse this is going to be and what they're trying to really open up this offseason with the run game. But then you get out there and you get a chance to see it, and it's just more outside zone. You're really seeing these guys, Emory Jones, Will Campbell, Miles Frazier, Garrett Dellinger. Your veteran offensive line is really being featured, I think, in this offense by the way they want to kind of operate this offense in the run game perspective. And look, Josh Williams, I think, has had some really good runs just in watching the practice this last Saturday. A bunch of holes were opened up for him, and they were able to incorporate Caleb Jackson in there as well. You see Caleb kind of working in also from a passing game perspective. They've been tossing the ball out to him a little bit, getting him out on the perimeter in that avenue as well. So I do think there's a lot of different ways they're going to be able to use these two guys. Certainly when Caden Durham gets in as well, the freshman, I think they're going to find some creative ways to involve him pretty early in his career. But just really more than anything, just the fact that they've really committed to this, I think, has been very impressive. You're seeing, and what you saw on Saturday was how that bleeds into what they want to do in the passing game. I mean, on Saturday you saw Garrett Nussmeier, Ricky Collins, all these guys, all these quarterbacks in play action situations under center, rollouts, screens, just quick ways to get the ball kind of moving, just kind of out and into these playmakers' hands. And they've been really doing that, I think, extremely well from an offensive perspective. Just kind of, leaning into a little bit of a different way they're going to go about things. The identity, the foundation of this offense has kind of remained the same. They want to get the ball out to these playmakers. Kyron Lacey has had a absolutely monstrous spring. We can talk a little bit about him as we go along here, but he's been fantastic, and just the way that they've been getting the ball into these guys' hands, I think, is really exciting to think about from an offensive perspective. And then on the defensive side of things, you're still seeing a lot of maturity, a lot of growth going on the interior defensive line, and certainly in the back half there with the secondary, with guys like PJ Woodland rotating in now, a true freshman. He's been rotating in with the first team for the better part of a week. You've got Sean McBride. I think he kind of subbed in a few times to get a few first team looks as well. And then you're got a pretty good nucleus there of veterans in Major Burns and Sage Ryan, Jordan Gilbert, Harold Perkins, Greg Penn. all these guys that are fitting in here into what they want to do schematically. They're aggressive. They're
Yeah.
attacking the thing. They're attacking the ball. They made a couple really nice plays in terms of pass breakups the other day on Garrett and on Garrett Nussmeier in the offense. So they're not getting. I'm trying to think of the right way to say this, but it's not as lopsided, I think, as you maybe saw some last year. And I think that's really good development for this defense. They're making some plays.
Yeah.
It's not perfect. They're still learning this defense, and they still really haven't gone too deep into the installation process. Just in talking with Blake Baker this last, Thursday, Friday, whenever that was, we got a chance to talk with Blake. He really just talked about how they want to play with some effort, with some concentration, with focus, and just kind of instill a foundational principle of what they want to do defensively. And that's not something it's not uncommon to hear in the spring. I think as you kind of get the film up and get to study what these guys are really good at, they'll be able to really dive into the nuts and bolts here over the summer and certainly into the fall. So lots of good things to take away from this last weekend's practice, and certainly I think over the next week they're going to be focused on getting some good film out there for them to really study and dive into this summer.
Yeah, one thing you pointed out that I wanted to kind of harp on was, look, even though you kind of have two new coordinators, really this offense, there's so much familiarity with it. We shouldn't expect massive hiccups in terms of any type of installation. I mean, there's going to be some different nuances. But if the defense, Glenn, was going out there and dominating, I'll be honest with you, I'd be a little concerned.
Yeah.
Because at this juncture, you should expect the defense in a spring ball format where, look, they're not going to show crazy type of formation, crazy blitz packages, crazy type of schematic stuff. This is a learning installation period. So the offense should be making plays. So to what you were saying is it's not as lopsided. I think that's almost that sweet spot that you want this to kind of sit in as, hey, the offense is making plays as they should. A lot of veteran guys. We've mentioned multiple times sitting out there at practice. At times, this offensive line just bullies LSU up front. Well, it's a
Yeah.
Joe Moore Award finalist type of offensive line. That's what should be happening with that familiarity. Defensively, they're holding their own. And I think from a fan's perspective, if you're sitting there saying, man, the reports that the offense is doing well and that Kyron Lacey's making great plays, that's encouraging. But I agree with you. I wasn't there last spring, but just even going back to last fall, to me, it's a night and day thing. Like you're seeing true competition, and I think these guys too, kind of later into spring ball, and you can speak to this. You're seeing a comfortability with what they're doing. Not as many necessarily one-on-one teaching moments with the coaches of saying, "Hey, yep, coach, I got you. That's what we were learning. That's what we were kind of going through. Let's implement that now." Specific situation on Saturday was the defense gives up a score, we'll call it. Harold Perkins comes back, and this is huge for the maturation of Harold Perkins. Comes back and doesn't, as a star player, doesn't the body language doesn't go. Instead, going around different teams, hey, let's go get after these guys next time. And then they go out and they get a stop the next time the first team defense is out there against the first team offense. So I think, and you can speak, that's the sweet spot you want to be in. You don't want one side of the ball dominating the other. But at this point, if you're realistic, the offense should be a little bit ahead of where this defense is.
Yeah, I agree completely, and I think probably one of the big things that you kind of watch when you're looking at some of these guys is you're seeing them be very coachable. I mean, there were a couple instances the other day where you mentioned Harold Perkins. Perkins was getting a little frustrated with just kind of the ease at which the offense was moving the ball, and it wasn't like big chunk plays. It was, this was also during the non-tackling part of practice too. So the offense has a really, big time advantage early in that, kind of setting where the defense is not really allowed to tackle and come up and make plays as much. But you could tell Perkins was getting a little frustrated, and, Blake Baker pulled him off to the side a couple different times, gave him a few words of encouragement, a few little details of maybe how they go about, slowing things down. And to your point, they had some good moments there in that 11-on-11 period earlier in the practice. And so I think that the big thing here is you want the defensive players to be responding to the coaching that they're getting, because as we learned as the season went along last year, they did not do that last year with
There
the
was an
previous
obvious
staff.
disconnect.
It was a pretty obvious disconnect, and I think a good first step this spring is these coaches connecting with the players. You see Bo Davis; he's as boisterous a coach as I have seen. On the sidelines, just watching up close and personal, how much he demands of his players and how much I think the players are starting to respect that. And I think that kind of translates throughout the entire defensive, kind of unit there. And I think they've really that part I think has been the one thing I think defensively that you can kind of hang your hat on, that you've learned, is that it looks like these players are kind of responding to what the coaches are telling them a little bit
Yeah.
more consistently. And look, they're still very early in the process here of installation, and so we won't have any sweeping declarations on how these guys look until we get back probably in the fall. But really impressed by just some of the growth that you've seen from some of the players. Savion Jones had a couple really nice pressures yesterday. One that would have been a sack if he was allowed to tackle the quarterback, but he's done well. In the back half, we've talked a little bit about PJ Woodland, the true freshman. I thought in terms of just playmaking, Sage Ryan has been as big a standout in that respect, at the deep safety spot, as anybody. So they've done a really nice job, I think, of just kind of getting these guys more involved. And I think the fact that they're playing up a little bit, they're playing a little bit more man coverage. I think that's something these players really are embracing right now. And the receivers are having some really good moments too. I mean, like
Mhm.
the big play that everybody's seen on social media of Kyron Lacy out jumping Jordan Gilbert for some big plays. That's been pretty consistent theme, and you saw it even on Saturday. I thought the two transfers, Xavion Thomas and CJ Daniels, both were getting some good first team reps, and Xavion in particular was really standing out to me in terms of just the plays that he was making down the sidelines. You get the ball to him in some space, man, he's off to the races. And that's very much, I think, what LSU would like to do with him, with an Aaron Anderson. Aaron Anderson had a nice couple plays in there as well. So they've been, I think, there's been some really good things from both sides of the ball. You can certainly nitpick a bunch of things that both need to be better at, and I think we'll get better at. But as far as like a construction of how spring goes, this is pretty much tailor made to, I think, what you wanted to see out of this group for the first couple weeks of spring ball.
Yeah, look, I mean, you take everything with a grain of salt. Like this is spring ball, a lot of installation. But look, college football fans, we're starved for this type of content. So anytime we read, practice notes, we get excited. Now let's kind of move into a couple of the particulars here, Glenn. Obviously, Coach Kelly talked with the media on Saturday. You mentioned Kyron Lacy. And Kelly's just been super impressed with him. But I wanted to kind of start on the back end of the defense here. I mentioned to you one name before, but obviously there's another big name. Let's start on the outside where PJ Woodland has really started to garner some, not just hey, you're working hard, we're going to give you some reps. Like it starts to feel like this, that there could be an opportunity that this guy can take some of the film that he gets during this valuable spring, practice period, go to work in the summer on some individual and working with teammates, and then maybe he heads into fall camp, Glenn, with a legitimate shot to really crack this rotation. I don't think that that's completely far fetched. When maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago we said, and we heard, hey, this guy is impressing people, but now that they've been on the field for nearly a month, I mean, it seems like that hype's kind of legitimate.
Yeah, I mean, look, Blake Baker was raving about PJ in his Thursday presser. I think the biggest thing with him is that he talked about Woodland just being a competitor,
Mhm.
feisty, physical, kind of player, and I think that's just kind of how they want this defense to be run in the secondary. They want guys to get up into these receivers. They want them to be physical at the line of scrimmage, and Woodland's still not the biggest guy. I mean, I think he's probably still buck 55, buck 60, in terms of weight, but he's been more than holding his own out there. He had a nice, I'm trying to remember who it was. He had a nice pass breakup against in that practice on Saturday, but he had one where he was in really tight coverage. I think the receiver made a nice play on the ball and he was able to make the catch, but it wasn't for a lack of Woodland not being there, and it would have been one of those catches where it was like you bring him down immediately kind of deal, and it wasn't like a huge gain. So he's been really, really good these last week or 10 days. It sounds like he's really stepped it up another level. That's kind of what the sense that I got in listening to Coach Baker's answer on Thursday. So he's somebody that I think you're going to have to absolutely watch out for, and I think that's a good thing that the secondary is kind of going through a number of different rotations. The first couple weeks there, it really was cemented as, Ashton Stamps, Javian Toviano were the clear first teamers. But, recently you've seen, Woodland get some work. Jair Brown, the transfer, has also gotten some good work in the first, second team kind of rotation. And J.K. Johnson's another one that I think, they really would like to see kind of take another step forward and get him more involved in what's going on as well. So they have a lot of bodies back there. I think we knew that coming in, and the depth at cornerback wasn't going to be lacking in terms of just numbers, but it's really the experience that you're hoping can kind of translate over here in this second season for a couple of these guys, and certainly for some of the newcomers, if they can kind of breathe some new life into this secondary. I'm sure Corey Raymond's all about that.
Yeah, no, and I was just kind of watching and talking with some other media members, and it feels like the consensus is, Glenn, that this corner, it doesn't feel like it's out of necessity. Like Ashton Stamps last year was in a similar spot where it was a guy who was, came in kind of a smaller guy, was thrust into maybe thrust into a position where in a perfect scenario, he's a guy that is able to come along better. And I'm not saying that Stamps didn't show flashes last year. He did. I just think you kind of sit in a situation now where there's not a firm top two, I feel like, but that's okay. It's not. I'm not saying they're going to be, the best secondary in the SEC. What I am saying is I think it's a better situation than you were last year. And a lot of people would say, I don't think it could be much worse. And that also might be true as well.
Yeah.
So it's kind of staying there and then moving into this new role, that star role. Glenn, when I was in the team room and Brian Kelly says, a guy that's really impressed me has been Major Burns. You could feel everyone, one, grab their phones to tweet that quote, and two, ears and eyes perked up, because this is a guy, Glenn, that, look, LSU fans, you kind of love him or you hate him. Like, it just kind of feels like one of those things. It's a guy that has been subject of criticism, but he's also the passion that he shows on the football field. He embodies what a lot of people feel like it is to be an LSU Tiger. Major Burns decides to come back. Major Burns is a heart and soul guy on this defense, in my opinion. And if he is taking the leaps and bounds necessary, and Brian Kelly hinted at, like, as a veteran guy, that's huge for the leadership of this defense. And if he's comfortable in this star role, man, I think it's a spot where all the potential he had coming out of high school, he goes to Georgia, he transfers down to LSU. Maybe he really, truly realizes that potential on the field this year. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. That's big news, though, if Major Burns, in the eyes of Kelly and that staff, has taken those type of leap.
Yeah, I mean, Brian Kelly could have picked any number of veterans that out of a hat and really talked about some improvements there, and he did talk about Kyron Lacey a little bit, and but the fact that he chose Major as like his first name, I mean, it was really not even like a thing where he had to think about it. He really kind of said Major Burns is somebody that has really impressed me from a coverage standpoint in terms of his improvements there, and I think. Again, it's something we were just talking about a little bit earlier. It sounds like LSU has found the right place for Burns to play. I mean, these last couple of years that he's been in the system, he's been a really high safety, deep safety, kind of the last line of defense. And it's been some very mixed results in terms of coverage and missed tackles. And that's something that, Brian Kelly told us yesterday, of course, that was something that I'm trying to remember the exact words that he used, but just something that was lacking in Burns's game. And you could see it on the field. I mean, every fan that is on our board, and certainly a lot of others can point that out. But I think the fact that they're getting him closer to the line of scrimmage, where there's not as much I guess, space to kind of mess up, is maybe the best way to put that. But
Yeah.
he's also somebody that can, at times, and he showed us this in his career, he can make some big hits, man. I mean, he can,
Hmm.
when he gets a full steam ahead on a play, he's somebody that can absolutely, force some fumbles and create some game changing plays. So the fact that he was somebody that Kelly kind of talked about right from the start, I thought was very interesting when asked about just kind of the guys that they've seen the most improvement in. So yeah, they've got him in that star position. They've got him closer to the line of scrimmage. Um, he still needs to develop as a coverage guy if he wants to kind of stick there. But I think that the goal of Blake Baker's defense is to get plays into the backfield, and to make some plays happen back there. And if Major's hovering around the line of scrimmage, I think that's probably the best spot for him, and we'll see if he's able to kind of take advantage of it on a pretty consistent basis here once things get started in the fall.
Yeah, I think one, kind of how you describe this, one thing that just sticks out to me, Major's a high risk, high reward player. When you limit the amount of grass, the amount of yardage in between him and said opposition, you're lowering that risk. So you're taking a high risk, high reward type of player, and you're maybe making him a maybe a lower risk, high reward type player. Because, like you said, it's a kid that can make game changing plays. We've seen it. Brian Kelly alluded. He goes a lot. He even said, and I think what the word he used was, Major's games struggled at times last year. And I will say this too, as a coach, I have not heard him be very direct about a certain player. That tells me a couple things. He doesn't feel this is not an example of a guy throwing, a guy into the bus by any means, but it also shows that Major's mental fortitude to understand, hey, I didn't play well last year. And it's known, and social media knows it. But for the head coach to come out there and say that, like, I don't view that as a bad thing. I view it as Major's a leader. He's taken some ownership as he and Blake Baker have worked together to find the best fit for him on this defense. And they realize that maybe this is better. I was really encouraged by that on several different levels. And it's going to be exciting, I think, to watch this guy because, like you said, when he's playing fast, free, and aggressive, that's the best version of Major Burns. Like, that's the best version that this defense can get. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. Um, Moving, even further down into the trenches, kind of the last little note here on the defense, Glenn, was what everyone wants to know: interior defensive line. Look, we got the portal opening up here in about a week or so, and that's going to be one of the key pieces. We already know they've brought in one transfer. You and I kind of sit on the, I think the same page of one, maybe one more after that. And Brian Kelly kind of alluded to the fact that, we've got to go find a guy. And I think, one, if you're sitting in the last week of spring ball and you can't confidently say you got two guys, that's obviously a high priority on the big board for the transfer portal. Like that's
Yeah.
what that is. But also what was encouraging is what Bo Davis wants to implement here from a mentality, from a physical standpoint, from an aggressive standpoint. It sounds like, Glenn, that Jacobian Guillory has embodied that, and he's a guy that you watch at practice. Seems to be one of those guys that Bo Davis is going to lean on as that on the field coach type of guy to carry out what he wants this defensive line to look like.
Yeah, Jacobian has been a mainstay in the starting rotation at defensive tackle. Brian Kelly, really raved about his leadership ability and just kind of the more onus that he's taken on in that room now with guys like Mason and Mekhi Wingo going pro. And you talked to Guillory last year, man. I mean, you can just see he's a leader. Like he's somebody that I
Mhm.
think is just a great talker and a great motivator probably for that room, and somebody I think LSU really needs to kind of step into that role. But like you mentioned, they're still tinkering with that interior D line, and I don't know that we're any closer to figuring out what that could look like than we were 3 weeks ago when spring hadn't started. So they've been of recently it's been kind of Chemo Macagnoli, who's been in that role. Also
Yeah.
kind of subbed in Jalen Lee a little bit yesterday, or I should say on Saturday in that uh, 2 hour practice we were able to watch. Sean Washington has also been in that mix as well at times this spring. So, but like you mentioned, like they've got to go out, and I think two more guys. Like I really do think that you've got one with Paez, the Wisconsin transfer. I think you need two more, in my
Yeah.
opinion, to kind of really feel better about the depth in that room. So we'll see. I mean, I think when you're evaluating the defensive line, probably the biggest quote that stuck out to me yesterday that Brian Kelly gave was about how they're diversifying the defensive line rotation on third down versus first and second. At least I didn't get a chance to see this. This was kind of towards the end of practice. Brian Kelly talked about one rotation that they had where they moved Braden Swinson and Paris Shand inside on third down, and they had Harold Perkins on an edge, and they had Deshaun Womack on an edge
Yeah.
for a third down situation like that. That kind of made my ears perk up. That was probably the biggest kind of takeaway that I had from the whole press conference yesterday. Just how they want to get those athletes on the field in those critical third down situations. And the best way to get them on the field in those third down situations is by doing your job on first and second down with those interior defensive tackles being able to get some push in the middle of the field. And I just don't know that they're there yet. You know, they've said it's a work in progress. Blake Baker certainly did not on Thursday. Actually, that was one of the questions I had for Blake in that press conference on Thursday. He did not exactly go out here and say that, oh, this guy's looking great, this guy's looking great. Now he says they're making some improvements, but there's still a long ways to go here to get to where they want to go on the interior in particular. I do think they have a lot of talent on the edge. You know, I think Swinson and Savion Jones and Paris Shand and Deshaun Womack, Jackson Howard. That's a pretty good start in terms of
Yeah.
your outside guys, because they're going more of a two traditional defensive end guys instead of having that jack linebacker, which is also something we've written about some. So, they I think they have some good depth on the edge where they can get some pressure, from the outside, but it's really going to come down to, can they get some push on the interior D line with these defensive tackles? And I think we know that Guillory's probably going to be one of those guys. But the second guy next to him and the depth behind them are very much up in the air right now. And I think that it's concerning, and they have to get that figured out. And we'll see if Bo Davis doesn't maybe have some tricks up his sleeve once the second portal window opens. I'm not so certain that they won't be able to find somebody that could come in and help them play pretty immediately here.
Yeah, I mean, look, and you talk about the portal. I mean, you're going to have specific positions where you have to have a specific need, like a running back, where a guy has to understand what type of role. Defensive line, not really. I mean, defensive line, it's something where, hey, if you want to come play and be a rotational guy or be the guy, come to LSU.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the best pitches. Where, Glenn, we've talked so many times about LSU's pitch for a player in the portal. Okay, quarterback with AJ Swan, understanding that Nuss is going to be the guy. Okay, running back, understanding that you're entering a room with a veteran in Josh Williams and Caleb Jackson, who they're high on. Defensive line, it's not a knock on who's there, but it's like kind of feels like open competition. Like, you want to come in and try to play and be the guy for us, when we suit up and play USC in Las Vegas in September, then come play here. I mean, that's it can be a positive and it can be a negative. It can be a negative for the folks that want to say, yeah, it's an issue. I think it's an issue, but it can be a positive in terms when you get to the portal and let's say a kid that is highly sought after by multiple top programs, and he starts to look at LSU and say, well, there's a better path to playing time. That would be the positive spin on all that. And I know we're going to go more into the portal, obviously, next week, but it's going to be interesting to see how things shake up from a complete roster perspective. Spring game, though, on Saturday, Glenn. Anything as we kind of wrap it up here we've talked a lot. Anything that you want to see before we kind of get out of this spring ball mode?
Yeah, I think I'd probably just like to see, offensively them continue to lean into the play action, the rollouts, the stuff that we've seen it in kind of individual periods in a couple of these practices. I'd love to see what that looks like for like 2, 3, 4 series in a row kind of deal, where it's offense versus defense, and you're trying to find a rhythm. So like I think that is really important. You want to see some of the progression with the outside zone on the run game, and see if you can't open up some holes for Josh Williams and Caleb Jackson. I think fans that are there, fans that watch on TV, you're going to see a different player in Kyron Lacey. Like I
Yeah.
really, it's not smoke about Kyron. I think he's going to be, Kelly talked about it some on Saturday. He's going to be a breakout player. I absolutely am kind of on board with that after getting to see him a couple times in some full practices. He has really stood out in terms of just the way he can kind of take over, an offensive series from the passing game perspective. So he's somebody to really look out for in this spring game. I think on the defensive side of the ball, how they rotate in the secondary, how they rotate in the trenches on the defensive line will be very interesting. You're going to obviously have Harold Perkins and Greg Penn and Whit Weeks kind of be those linebackers you're rotating on the inside there. But those are just a couple of things just to kind of see that in more of a scrimmage game setting than what we've been able to see so far. I think will be really beneficial for everyone.
Yeah, I know you mentioned it. I'll throw just a couple more in there. I'm excited to see CJ Daniels, in more of a open atmosphere and what he brings to the table. And then I'm excited to see Aaron Anderson, Xavier Thomas, and a lot of these receivers kind of in this screen game that they've been
Kyle
working
Parker,
on.
yeah.
Kyle Parker, another one of them. Like just this little, like these tunnel screens and these bubble screens that they're kind of been working on. I'm excited to see what that looks like, because look, who doesn't like to see a big old Will Campbell or Emory Jones running out there and taking out a DB for a screen pass? That's why we love college football, and that's what we love about the game. But hey, spring game going to be this Saturday. A couple more practices, and we'll have you covered there. Boots on the ground. Hey, we appreciate you tuning in. Appreciate you for watching, whether it's on YouTube. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe. Let us know down below your thoughts kind of on the latest that Brian Kelly has said in spring ball altogether. And if you're listening to this, whether it's on Spotify, Apple, we appreciate you over there as well. Leave us a 5-star review. Or if you don't want to, that we just leave us a review in general. We'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on what we do. But hey, he is Glen West. My name is Bryce Koon. And we'll catch you next time here on the Go 24/7 podcast.